Was there any connection with the White House report?
Please use the microphone so that people online.
So I can repeat that question. So the question was there any connection with the White House reports? So there was no formal connection with the White House reports. And actually, Ed Felton is here, so he can talk about that with more authority than I can. But we did have people in common that were on the study panel who also participated in a series of workshops that led up to the White House reports. In fact, in some case, chairing those panels. Ryan Kalo chaired one of the workshops. David Parks went to some, Mill and Tambay. So there were people in common, but there was no formal connection. We were certainly aware of each other. We did put out an executive summary, a sort of a preview of our executive summary in May, I believe, that was in time to be a part of the thinking of the AI of the White House reports. Our report is cited in the White House reports as well. I don't know if Ed wants to say any more about that, but no formal connection, but in practice, a lot of crosstalk.
Oh, can you see here? Yeah. So I wonder whether there are social scientists that were on the panel. I couldn't tell.
So I don't want to speak for everybody for how they would identify themselves as social scientists or not, but I can show you the list of people. Anna Saxenian is I think would characterize herself as partly a social scientist, and Ryan Kalo is a professor of law, but it was more. So it was, most of the people were AI technologists.
Is there a section on the result of consequences of automation?
So in the employment in the workplace, so there's the employment and workplace section talks about that to some extent, and that theme does run through the report. Yes.
I wonder whether it's a good idea to reach out to unions to get their responses.
To unions?
Yeah, the people who might lose jobs.
So, so that was, I think, not something that we explicitly put into the report, but certainly, I would personally think that yes, it's not. That's a good idea to talk to the people who are going to be affected. And I've actually talked personally with taxi drivers who are very worried about autonomous cars, but that's not something that we addressed in this report.
I'm Nello Cristianini from the University of Bristol. This is a question about the report, but also maybe the panel, the entire bigger picture. It's obvious that this sort of generation of researchers are those who will shape a lot of things to come. And many of these things will not be reversible. So once you innovate in a certain way, you even dismantle previous infrastructure, so you don't go back. So people should be quite responsible, feel responsible about what they're doing, of course. And a lot of things will change. Before you do your next report in 5 years' time.
Not me, somebody else.
You may find that a lot of the questions are no longer meaningful because they have already happened. If you wanted today to regulate social networks with 1.2 billion users in Facebook, it would be a pointless discussion. It has happened. Certain things you can regulate before. So it's a little bit concerning that a lot of these decisions or discussions, also in the panel, are done by 6 engineers. Because the most you can hear is that humans make mistakes too. We don't expect them to be perfect. Or humans aren't readable too. We don't expect humans to be readable. They only make up a fake explanation post factum. And this is all true. This is how humans work. However, there are centuries of traditions and customs and laws about accountability, about demanding an explanation. Humans in decision-making positions know that they are accountable because of social norms and so on. All that doesn't exist in the machines we are going to put in the center of our infrastructure.
Yeah, so in fact, I think this is part of the point you're making. In the policy recommendation section, the first one I have up on the screen now is to define a path towards accruing technical expertise in AI at all levels of government. Effective governance requires more experts who understand and can analyze the interactions between AI technologies, programmatic objectives, and overall societal values. The decision shouldn't be made by 6 engineers. We need to get AI literacy into all levels of government, and that was the number one recommendation. Correct me if I'm wrong, I think that's part of the point you're making as well.
You don't have much time. If you expect the MPs or the members of the Senate to become educated, by the time they're educated, it's too late.
or we need different, or different, the new generation of leaders. But yeah, so how to do this?
I don't think we as a community, we as engineers, I don't think we should feel that we can dismiss these concerns with people who ask them actually are like the user who doesn't know derivatives. We should listen, because as a community we are not going to understand the big shift in power that is underway today. And it would be nice also, because you are being webcast, that we don't come across as being dismissing this.
I agree.
So let's go to the microphone back there, then back to Richard, then to Suresh, and then I think we'll need to stay on time for the last one.
Okay, so I was just going to mention the IEEE report that came out in December and obviously had over 100 different people from different interdisciplinary groups. And I just wonder how you feel that your study, their study, and the White House studies should all sort of be read together and in the way that they're doing different things.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I've looked at several of these. I can't say that I know all of them, the details of them all as much as I know this one. Certainly, though, with the White House reports, there's many common themes. There's also some different focuses. We scoped out military aspects. The White House report made, I think, more focused recommendations on the what should happen from economically, and there's a specific economic-based report. But I think the reports that are being generated by people from within the community are sounding, not surprisingly, many of the same themes. There was, and we actually made a conscious decision not to specifically take on artificial general intelligence and try to comment on whether how it relates to artificial intelligence as a mainstream discipline, as a decision not to give credibility to it as much. But there are other reports that specifically say take it on and say here's why it's not mainstream. So there's sort of subtle differences in decisions that were made in some of the aspects, but I think many of them are sounding some of the similar themes. A unique thing about this report is I think it's not meant just to be a point in time. It's meant to begin this longitudinal process, and so we had that sort of burden and that perspective on us, and we were always thinking about that. So that gave us a slightly different perspective as well. But I think I certainly don't mean to be saying that you should read this report and only this report. In fact, I think it would be very, very useful for somebody who's interested in the perspective of artificial intelligence and policy and future to read all of these, all of the reports that have been generated recently.
Yeah, just a minor addition. There is, in fact, a really large literature in the history of technology, the sociology of technology, where people have studied things like the electrification of rural America. And although it might seem a little ridiculous to us, or at least some of us, there's actually a lot of insight that can be brought to bear on this kind of things you're talking about. I hope that the next panel will include some historians who know about this. I think you do a much better job of projecting the future by knowing something about the past.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. And that was, from a smaller scale, that's why we decided to not just project the future, but also look back within a short period of time. For every one of these, from 2015, we looked back 15 years to give ourselves perspective and to write in the report what has changed and what realistically changes in 15 years and what moves forwards in 15 years. But yes, we also explicitly discussed parallels with the Industrial Revolution, and that I think there is some allusion to that in the workplace section as well. When we talk about jobs being created and jobs being transformed, this is certainly not a unique point in history when that has happened, and we were fully conscious of that. But you're right that there weren't professional historians on the panel, and that's something that could be taken into consideration for the future.
Okay, last one.
Hi. So I have 2 points. One is, I guess, sort of related to that. That one of the areas that tend to get ignored in not just yours, I give it as a very friendly comment. I think it's a great panel, but that's also true for OSTP, is human factors and psychology people, because I think really the problem we have that we're talking about is human-aware AI systems. If AI systems are on the Mars, you don't need this 100-year report. And there are people who actually think about how technology affects humans and how basically people get used to it and so on. It would have been great to have somebody from that community to be present, both in your report as well as in I guess in this meeting. In general, I think that's a good direction. The other point is you made this, and probably the only technical point with respect to this is, you made this very nice point earlier, which I keep telling my students, that if somebody tells you that you're biased, say, thank goodness I am biased, because evolutionarily I would have been dead if I didn't have any biases. But really the real issue is how, as you said, to make the systems up, since we are, we don't necessarily exhibit our biases, although I guess a Confederate flag might exhibit some bias, but generally I won't tell you what my biases are. But if I'm writing a system, I should make the system declaratively tell its bias. And I wonder whether something of that, not just to you, but anybody in the machine learning community, have they talked about having systems essentially sort of notify what sorts of biases they are using, so that you can then pick. So if I'm trying to decide as a brown guy, who do I ask for help, a truck with, Confederate flag versus, let's say, pretty much anybody else, I think I can make a reasonable choice because the biases were essentially exhibited. So I was wondering whether that sort of a thing might be a technical answer to that.
Yeah, so I fully agree, and as I said, this is one thing. In retrospect, I wish we would have called out more explicitly that that the goal is not to eliminate bias, but to identify and control and be sort of transparent about the biases. So I fully agree with that. Going back to, though, your point about human interaction, that actually is a very strong theme throughout the report. In healthcare and education, when we talk about the barriers and the risks or more the barriers to achieving the potential benefits of artificial intelligence technologies in healthcare and education, we very strongly talk about the having to get the trust of both the physicians and the patients, to have interfaces interfaces for being able to communicate back and forth, and for people to understand the decision making that's going on, and to really recognize that it's people that are interacting with these systems. So that came out in the entertainment section, in the healthcare section, and the education section especially. And we did. The chair of the standing committee, Barbara Gross, works very closely in this area, and to the extent that she was giving feedback on the report, that was a theme that she also made sure was prevalent there.
I think that's all great, but still a bunch of engineers talking about how humans would interact with technology is a bit of an oxymoron. So I think we do need non-engineers. Barbara has obviously been a big proponent of human-aware AI systems from God knows how long. But generally, the rest of many of us basically tend to be much more, engineering-oriented. So I think it'll be great to have, especially meetings like this, it should be great to have people who talk about that. Yeah,
and I think Etche represented that on the panel as well. But yes, I agree. That is something that, again, if we could have had a panel of 50 people, we would have included lots more. But to the extent we could, with the people who were being represented here, this was a topic that was given a lot of credence to, and so I agree.